Good morning. Welcome to our Native American Heritage Program. I'm very pleased and proud to introduce Jean Delcourt in just a moment. Before I do that, though, I wish to acknowledge Jackie Jackson, who's the co-advisor for the Multicultural Alliance. Those of you that may not know me, my name is Rubina John. I also happen to be one of the co-advisors. I'm going to turn the mic over to Jackie. I'm going to take a minute then and introduce the faculty that also happen to be present today, faculty and staff, and then I'll also ask if the students from the Multicultural Alliance will take just a moment and introduce themselves very briefly, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Delcourt.
Good morning. I didn't know she wanted me to speak, but those of you that have me in class know that this is not a problem, right? For me to be able to do that. I'll be brief. As Romina said, welcome. And for my class, you can feel free to put this presentation in your learning journals for this week if you so choose, okay? And I'm just glad to see people here for this presentation, and thank you once again for coming. She's in my ear. Yes, MCA is selling fudge until Friday. This is like the public service announcement. Yeah. And it's $9. Well, it's really good. There's a sample over there, so if you want to come try it. And we'll be upstairs in the Welcome Center from 12 to 1 through Friday. So please come and buy. The proceeds benefit hurricane relief in Puerto Rico and Mexico, because we changed up a little bit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. She's the pitch person. So okay, am I done now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'm going to ask Cynthia Delcourt to do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to ask the other faculty members and his Multicultural Alliance members to introduce themselves as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Cynthia Delcourt, the teaching learning specialist here. I work with your instructors on Blackboard and other educational technology.
Good morning. My name is Mike Flory, and I'm a general education math instructor at the Advanced Manufacturing Center in Milton. If you haven't had a chance to go out there, check it out. It is awesome.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Nogler. I'm a retired nursing instructor. Happy to be here, though.
So glad to have you here.
Hi, my name is Tashina. I'm the president of the MCA Multicultural Alliance Club. And I would like to encourage all of you, please come be a part of our club. I mean, we're down to maybe 5 students, and this is something that impacts our nation. I mean, we should definitely have a lot more people there with us, so.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sari Sarath, and I'm also part of MCA, and I'm the secretary. And I'm glad to see everybody here to support this cause. Thank you.
And with that, we're just so absolutely thrilled and honored to have Jean Delcourt with us. Jean is a long-term teacher. He's retired from teaching at the Madison School District. He's a proud veteran and has lots and lots of experience with what he's going to be talking with you about. Pine Ridge Reservation is where much of the work that he'll be talking about with us today is what he's been doing. With that, rather than to waste more time, Mr. Delcourt.
Is this on already? Yes. So good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you here, and it's really, really nice to be here. The talk today is about an Indian reservation in South Dakota called Pine Ridge. I know that here in Wisconsin we have 7 reservations, and a lot of the issues that I'll talk about on Pine Ridge probably are to one degree or another prevalent on some of the reservations here too. The reason I've been focusing on Pine Ridge for the last let's see, what year is it? 2017, the last 9 years, is that Pine Ridge has the distinction of being the poorest county in the entire country. It is the third world, and it's so tucked away, sort of federal Indian policy was such that, the Lakota people from the Pine Ridge and South Dakota area were the last native tribe to be conquered. And that was only 117 years ago. No, 127 years ago now, when the last the Indian Wars were over. And the animosity between federal government, local non-Indian neighbors, and the Lakota is still very, very hostile. The treaties that were finally made as Pine Ridge was established Pine Ridge as a prisoner of war camp, and it's never had that distinction taken away. It's still considered a prisoner of war camp. You can come and go, of course, but the very least desirable land in South Dakota was the land that they put these people on, because it's not very farmable. There is no industry. The unemployment rate on Pine Ridge is about 83%. And so people live on what federal assistance they can get. The promise of health care, the promise of education is wholly underfunded by 50-60%. And so they make do with what they can, and it is a very, very destitute place. Not to say that the human condition doesn't find ways to find joy in life and find kindness in life, although the isms on this reservation and on many reservations, to be honest, is horrendous. Still, my experience with many of the Lakotaville and Pine Ridge are that they're as giving a people as I've ever seen. For example, I was there once. I've been there 12 times with classes, high school classes that we've gone up for service trips, and spent a week with this organization, this flyer on the table called Remember. They're a really, really amazing organization. They've been on the reservation for 22 years. They are now recognized by the Native people as legit. They didn't just come and go with a whirlwind of bleeding heart do-goodedness, but they're the real deal. And I was on tour day. We'll get into this later, but on the fourth day of the fourth work day, the groups, and they can take 45 people at a time in any given week from March through October. They go on a tour of the reservation to see some of the positive things that are there. Well, I've done it so many times that I just volunteered. Instead of doing the tour with my class, I would go and either finish projects that we had started or go out to the state parks and cut firewood and deliver firewood to people. And we were delivering a load of firewood to an old woman, and she had told us she's not going to be there because she had to go to get dialysis done. She was diabetic. And if we would, to bring the wood onto her property, don't just leave it in the yard, but onto the property and into her house, because people would steal it. So we did that, and it was an old log cabin, and so deteriorated. There were some spots where the logs had been eaten away by termites. You could actually see into the house, and up a long ramp and into the house, and there was no furniture, and there were cats everywhere, and cans of evaporated milk opened for the cats. And this woman, who was probably in her 80s, living by herself, had a little tiny, I used to call it a Cubby Burner when I was in Cub Scouts. It's a coffee can with holes punched in the middle, tuna can with cardboard cut and spiraled in, wax poured in, light it, and there's your little stove. That's what she was cooking with. That's how she ate. And when the man that I was working with, he was also a volunteer, and he'd been there 5 or 6 times with me, and he went in first, and I just heard him say, "Good Lord," and I walked in and saw it, and it was like, man, we were both really, really choked up and in tears. Well, when we finished delivering the wood and we were getting ready to leave, she and her brother had driven in. He had driven her to her dialysis, and she came up to us and shook our hand and reached into her purse and gave us gifts for doing what we did for her. a necklace for me to give to my wife and a book to give to the man that was with me. And I was just kind of floored by that. This woman has literally doesn't have a pot to piss in, has an outhouse, and is giving away what few things she actually has. And it was really very, very telling about the concept of giving that is sort of foreign to us, where in our society, and I'm as guilty as any, we are consumers, and we have, and I have so much stuff that I have to build new structures to house all my stuff. I'm sure you can all relate to some degree or another, and so it's kind of very, very different way of seeing the world. And it's refreshing, and it's my sincerest hope is that after this is over, you guys will take one of these brochures, look into it, maybe organize a trip to go out there with a group or individually. You can go anytime during that time. You just have to sign up in advance, and if they have an opening on a given week, volunteer to go. It costs money, and that's the money they use to cover their overhead costs of the building that you'll be living in. Heat and hot water and food, because they feed you and house you for a week, and then the supplies that we use to do what we do, whether it's skirting trailers or building houses or building outhouses or bunk beds or whatever. That's what they use to buy the supplies. So it's money well spent, and compared to many what do they call those trips people take to do community service? Missions, I guess, if you want to call them missions. Many missions cost far more than what Remember asks of you. So it's, I hope you consider it down the road. I have a slideshow of my experience there, and some of my students I'll talk about. And many of the slides have little stories that go along with it. I'm going to go ahead and go with them until it starts feeling like time is getting short. And if there's time, I have a TED Talk from a man named Aaron Huey, who is a photographer for National Geographic, and he did a long project on Pine Ridge, but kind of going with this dismal gray day, it is kind of heart-wrenching. And so if we don't have time to do it, I don't think any of you will be any worse for it, because it's gonna tug at your heartstrings. It's a very, very hard film to watch, or hard talk to watch. Anyway, can we start on the slideshow? Remember, the name Remember is sort of a play on words. It's the opposite of dismember, or to put back together rather than to take apart. And so that's the name they chose. They're a non-religious organization, so that oftentimes a lot of groups that go out on these missions tend to go with the hope of getting to talk about religion. And man, they've been hearing that from every sect of Christianity there is, except maybe Mormonism. I'm not sure about that. Is that even Christian? I don't even know. So they don't need to be proselytized. They already know what's going to be said. But if you go, we've gone there with the intention of building relationships and offering to recognize that these people's struggles are our struggles. I mean, we want so strongly to believe that aren't we all Americans here, despite the political differences and the incredible division that exists in American politics today and in American mindset today. Wisconsin's being the perfect example. I don't think a whole lot of Scott Walker supporters would ever see my point of view, just as I would never want to see their point of view, because the division is so absolute. It's just not going to change, and that's unfortunate. It's going to take some real powerful leaders to bridge that gap, and I can only hope that person or those people emerge in my lifetime, certainly in yours. So we'll go ahead and get started. Is this clicker? Is it ready for me to work? What do I do? I must aim it this way. There we go. So Pine Ridge, this is 1890. These are some scenes from the Wounded Knee Massacre. This man here, his name was Bigfoot. He was a leader of a group of Hunkpapa Lakota, not the people that live on Pine Ridge, but the people that live, I think, in Standing Rock. He was going to Pine Ridge to talk to Chief Red Cloud, who was a leader on Pine Ridge, a really, really great military leader. He had defeated the American military many, many times, he and Crazy Horse, until the invention of repeating rifles. Repeating rifles was the game changer. Anyway, Bigfoot was taking his people to Pine Ridge to talk about what was called the ghost dance. It was a sort of a spiritual movement that was happening at the time that promised to return all of the buffalo that had been killed, and all the white people would leave. And it was a bit of a delusional vision, but the people were so desperate for something to preserve their way of life that they were embracing this. They wore certain clothing that promised that they wouldn't be hit by bullets. And anyway, he was just on his way to go talk to Red Cloud about this dance that he'd heard about when he was surrounded by the 5th Cavalry. That was General Custer's old organization, so of course the soldiers in that organization had already had a pretty bad attitude towards the Lakota people, because they're among the people that killed the Custer on all of his men in 1876. And so they were surrounded and made to camp the night here in Wounded Knee. And Wounded Knee is just a shallow valley, And the next morning, the Army everyone woke up to see that these large guns that had exploding shells called Hotchkiss guns were on all the hills aiming in. Now, I would imagine that would make me a little uncomfortable, but the Army was told, go into all of the dwellings and disarm everybody. And so the story goes, there was a deaf man who had a rifle, and they wanted to keep their rifles so that they could at least hunt. And he didn't understand what was going on, and when the soldier tried to grab it, it went off. And that's all it took for the Hotchkiss guns to light up the valley. Everybody, 200 natives were killed, 30 American soldiers were killed by the friendly fire. There was no battle. It was just a massacre. And interestingly enough, 20 Congressional Medals of Honor were issued to soldiers from that incident, which is more than have ever been awarded in any incident in American history. Iwo Jima, the Battle of the Bulge, some of the battles that are historically, we were on the right side. We were on the right side in those wars, it seems, and Congressional Medals of Honor were not handed out like that. 20 of them, it just seemed like an awfully big cover-up to me to make these people heroes when in reality it was a slaughter, and they were killed by their own fire. Anyway, this was him the day after the battle. There was a big blizzard happening when it happened. He's frozen solid, still in an upright position. So we can go to the next slide. I can do that, can't I? This is the mass grave that they threw all the bodies in. There were about 200 people that were found dead. As far away as a mile, as people were running, trying to get away, the soldiers ran them down and killed them, men, women, and children. And so it's not really something that people were proud of. And I would imagine, though it not the kind of thing that was recorded in those days, but I would imagine there was an awful lot of post-traumatic stress even among the soldiers. I mean, you can't do this kind of thing and not be affected by it. You just can't, unless you're not human. But presumably they were all human. Oops. This is the grave marker, and you notice that it's kind of shoddy looking. It's kind of beat up. It was put up by a rich benefactor without being asked to put it up. He just opted to do it because he felt so bad about what happened. And the Lakota people have decided when the earth takes it back, they're going to let it. It's not something they want to see fixed. It's not that they want to forget. They'll never forget. But if they're gonna memorialize the incident, they want to do it themselves. And at this point, they're not financially able to do that. Oh, geez. This is the actual marker in the mass grave. What's inside the fence is that trench that you saw in the previous slide being dug. This marker here has the name of a lot of the prominent leaders that were killed in the battle. Part of Remember's week, their week is the same for every volunteer group that comes in. On Saturday, you arrive in the afternoon. They want you there by about 4 in the afternoon. You get an orientation, you have a meal, then they spend the evening telling you about what the week's going to be like. Sunday morning is a trip to Wounded Knee, which is only 7 miles away from where Remember is headquartered. You spend time at the Wounded Knee. There's a young man that comes and gives a talk about what happened, and he's sort of on the payroll. He does this with every week with the different groups, and if the weather's good, you will then go to Remember has purchased a parcel of land, an old farm that was sold by somebody who had gotten a piece of land due to the Dawes Act. Anyone familiar with the Dawes Act? 1887, the United States government said if we give every native person, head of household, 160 acres, no, it's not 160 acres, it's 40 acres of their own, we can make them farmers and they can become Americans. Well, that left an awful lot of land left over, and what they used that land for was to sell it and make money, sell it to non-Indian people. So Pine Ridge is checkerboarded with lots and lots of non-Indian land parcels. So is every reservation in the country, except maybe the Navajo reservation in New Mexico and Arizona. I'm not sure if that one is or not, but you go up to Lac Flambeau in Wisconsin or Le Coudray, all of the lakes, these beautiful lakes that are on these reservations, none of that land is owned by Indians. That was part of the checkerboard, and those are the parcels that people wanted to buy, of course. Just a little offshoot of American history there. Another close up, and you see all the flags hanging on the fence. These are brought by people, presumably maybe some sun dancers, because of the colors on the flag. There's tobacco in those ties, and they hold great spiritual significance. The understanding is that the Creator gave 4 sacred plants to Native people to use to pray with. Tobacco being the one that connects you directly to the Creator. That's the vehicle. When you smoke a pipe, that smoke becomes a literal, a physical manifestation of your prayers, of your intention. As the smoke goes up into the universe, and I think that's pretty cool. So that's what these are. Sometimes you'll see a grave, because there's a bunch of graves on the outside here with a cigarette on it. Sometimes a cigarette's just a cigarette, but sometimes, depending on intention, it's also a spiritual offering. There's a great book, as one of the books that they list on the Remember, not the pamphlet, but the booklet there. They have a suggested reading list just to get a deeper understanding of Pine Ridge and Lakota people. One of the books is called Neither Wolf Nor Dog by a man named Kent Nurburn. He goes into that idea about a cigarette being sometimes just a cigarette, but other times a spiritual offering. Okay, now we get to Remember. This is one of their trailers. They've got about 6 of these with big trucks that pull all the tools and equipment to each job site. There's usually 3 job sites or 4 job sites happening on any given week. So they have crew leaders and volunteers. And oftentimes they'll ask from volunteer groups, they'll try to have at least one person in each of the volunteer groups who has some experience with carpentry so that they can help lead and teach. Because oftentimes, how many of you have any experience with power tools or have no experience with power tools? A couple of you. If you go there and you don't know how to use a radial arm saw or a chainsaw for that matter, you got to have somebody who knows what they're doing to teach you. Otherwise, it's a danger. So you can see on the subtitle here, an outreach project to the Oglala Lakota Nation on Pine Ridge. They don't try to market themselves as saviors going out there to help these people, to save these people, but really to recognize that these people's troubles are all of our troubles, and it's easy, and it's part of the privilege of being an American, that we don't have to pay attention to it. You know, it's a lot of people are happier not knowing this even exists, and that was the whole intention of putting them where they put them, you know, in the middle of nowhere, where they'll be forgotten. But luckily, you know, thank God that there are people out there who really are altruistic and want to be out there, you know, recognizing that we all need a hand and having the heart to do that. This is their front yard. This big building to the right is the dorm and the kitchen. The building to the left is the office where the secretary and the director do their work. This little garden in front is from above. It's a medicine wheel. You can imagine a circle bisected or divided into four with four colors. The Lakota consider red, yellow, black, and white as sacred colors, each corresponding to a different direction on the compass. And a lot of natives do too, and they may have different colors that they use, but these are the colors of the Lakota way. This is their kitchen. It's a pretty awesome industrial kitchen. I've been talking to them a lot whenever I go there to say, I would like to volunteer to come out for the summer if I can be the cook. You know, I want to be the cook, and they probably would hire me if I would actually do it. But getting time away, and I have a elderly woman that lives with my wife and I, her mom, and it's not really the time for me to leave for the entire summer. But my wife has come out a few times too, and I think when the time does come, we probably both will go out and do it, because it's a really amazing kitchen, and I really like to cook. So this is, believe it or not, this is one of the job sites. Some of these trailers that are given to people to live in are literally not fit for human habitation. The reason that housing is such a problem in Pine Ridge is the Housing and Urban Development Department of the United States federal government I don't think this was an intended thing, but in their hope to combat the very, very constant and strong winds of South Dakota, when they built HUD houses all over the reservation in these different villages, they sealed them with plastic so that no moisture could get in from the outside, rain and snow and weather. The problem is it also kept the moisture on the inside, and black mold ended up taking hold, and about 63 or 65% of the houses on the reservation are not livable. And so you've got trailers, sometimes like this, sometimes with just outhouses that 15 people might be living in it. You know, whole families and extended families are living because there's no other place to live. I remember dealing with a trailer. It was just a little 24-foot trailer. An old grandma had like 18 children in there with her, you know, from high school to babies. Had to take the bathroom out just to make room for people to sleep. And so they bathed by heating water on a stove. They heated the house with a stove, just a gas stove, propane stove, and had an outhouse because they had no running water. Many houses on Pine Ridge have to decide in the wintertime to shut their water off because they can't afford water and propane because money is so scarce. And so one of the things Remember does regularly is install outhouses. And outhouses eventually fill up, especially when a family of 18 is using an outhouse. And so you either have to move it or build a new one. Not one of the more exciting jobs, but certainly one of the important jobs. And we're told from day one, and when my classes would be planning trips out there, I would tell them from the semester before we even went out, always know that this trip is never ever about you. So don't come to me with your drama about I need to shower more than once a day, or whatever. Don't come to me with that, because this is not about you. This is about them. And so when we have an ugly job like relocating an outhouse, we do it. We do it, and we don't complain, because in a week we'll be home in the comfort of our own home, regardless of our socioeconomic status. We're not living this way. We don't live in places like this. Sometimes the wind in South Dakota is so strong that sometimes these trailers can just get blown over. And so in a few slides, you'll see some people putting in these 3-foot anchors, big screw-in anchors, to put cables over the top of these trailers to hold them in place so that the wind can't blow them down. Okay. Here's another. I actually worked on this house. No windows, no doors. We did all of that. We had to do all of that. And we had to do it in as cheap a fashion as possible because money is scarce. Even Remember's money is scarce. They can't be buying good Pella windows. They're just getting windows from the equivalent of the Habitat for Humanity resale store. Anything they can get and make them work. Here's a group digging a trench to bury the skirting. We're putting skirting T111 of these sheets of plywood, but it has these boards sort of carved in, so it looks like they're boards. And they're digging a trench so that when the pieces get put in, you can backfill it and the wind can't get underneath. That's the whole point. I noticed that there's no insulation going in below it, so this must be the south side of the house. On the north, east, and west sides, they always try to insulate. And it may be rudimentary insulation because, again, they use what they can get. But this house was not, this had to have been the south side. Just more of it. This piece of metal that's dangling down, that's what keeps the wind out from the top. It's just flashing. We either bend up or remove and then put back on. Sorry, the quality of this slide is bad. I think it was taken with a flip phone camera. Here's another group still doing more skirting. And so for many, and I know this girl here with her back to us, it was her first time ever using even a cordless drill, because they don't use any nails. It's all done with screws to make it as strong as it can be, to hold things as fast as they can be held. And she'd never used one before, so it's a little bit of a slow process, but the students gain valuable skill and valuable experience in doing it. This particular house had a family living there, and the father came out and helped us every day, which is unusual. Many times the people are so ashamed that to be seen living in these houses, they just take off and they're gone for the day until we leave. But this family was not. They wanted to contribute and they wanted to help. And I had a student, actually the kid in the previous slide with the bandana on his head. He was emotionally a pretty damaged kid, very, very immature and very difficult. He never really understood that this is not about you, this is about them. And he was such a, to be blunt, he was such a pain in the ass that I gave him a job for 3 of the 4 days we were there, which was to be inside the house taking care of a new batch of kittens. He just took care of the kittens, played with them, and kept them busy. And that worked out just fine. This is me with short hair. So this must be, let's see, the year after my dog died. And we're insulating underneath the skirting, so this is probably the other side of the house, or maybe it's a different house, I'm not sure. The trailers all look the same. Incidentally, a lot of the FEMA houses that got taken away from New Orleans because they were no longer livable, they were taken straight to Pine Ridge. And formaldehyde be damned, that's what people are living in. This is me and a young lady putting in an anchor. That's a screw-in anchor to throw over the top to keep it from blowing over. And this is a kid on the other side doing the same thing, and I have a quick story, I think I can tell it, about this young man. On our way there was a gas station just this side of the South Dakota border. And Pine Ridge is on the far west end, so we're at the east end by Sioux Falls. And we saw a gas station that had a sign that said, "Live Buffalo." So, Gene, let's go get gas there. So we pulled in, and I got a cup of coffee and bought gas, and they all went to see the one lone kind of pitiful little buffalo just standing there. And they all sat down and they were smoking a cigarette. It's an alternative school, so smoking is kind of tolerated. And then it was time to go, and we all took off, and we got to Pine Ridge later that day, and he came up to me and he said, "Gene, I lost my wallet. I don't know where, but I had $300 in it." I'm sorry, Kevin, I don't know what to say. Do you think it might have been at the gas station? He said, it could be. So I took out the receipt, I found the number, I called the guy, and he just wasn't interested. He just wasn't interested in going out and looking. So part of me thought maybe he found it and he's keeping it because of the money. I don't know. He ended up eating it. You know, there was nothing he can do. Well, 8 months later at his graduation, his mother gave him a graduation gift at the ceremony at the school, and he opened it up, and inside this baggie was this old mold-covered thing. What the heck is it? And he opens it up, and he realizes, oh my God, it's my wallet. Opens it up, oh my God, there's $300 moldy in here. And somebody had done the same thing, gone to see the buffalo, saw the wallet, checked that out, and noticed on the driver's license the kid's last name. And he said, I know a Wilker from Wisconsin. So he called his friend. I don't know if he'd gone to college or been in the service with him. Do you have a relative named Kevin? Yeah, I have a cousin named Kevin. Man, I found his wallet in South Dakota. I'm going to send it to you, and you can get it to his mother. And that's what happened. And his mother didn't tell him, and she eventually gave it to him for his graduation gift, which I thought was really cool. That's why he's smiling. No. Okay, this is another job. We had to tear out the floor of a bathroom because it was all rotten. So we put a whole new floor in and new pipes, and my kids did it. We were the only volunteer group there that year. No, that's not true. There was 7 older folks from Minneapolis. They were called the Grey Panthers. Most of them quite old, incontinent. They couldn't do anything. You know, they made lunch. They made lunches for us, and that was about all they could do. But they did that, you know, and that was good. And they became these kids' surrogate grandparents, and so it was a nice experience to meet them. But they didn't do any work. And so these kids did this whole bathroom while we were skirting at the same time. Other parts of the group was skirting, and these 3 worked in this bathroom. Another picture of one of the girls using a sawzall. Yeah, that's what it's called. Using a sawzall for the first time. She's getting ready to cut that floor out. Excuse me. We're building framing for the skirting right now. That gets tied into the 2x4 that's under the trailer, and then the skirting screws into that. Then we backfill it. And by the time you get to the last piece, you have to send someone in to make sure none of the dogs or cats have gone in there, because there's no getting out. Once they're in, there's no getting out. And we've heard meowing and couldn't find the cat. Where's this cat coming from? He was inside, and so we had to take a piece off and let it out. Here's another project of putting a deck on a stairway into the house. I think this is a different trailer. This was sort of a unique project. It was a really, really large house. I think it had belonged to a farmer at some point, but he sold it to a native woman, and she'd had a fire, and the roof was all burned off, so we had to take the roof off, and we were building a new roof. That was the sort of the most fun we'd had as a construction project, because it's usually just small things, putting in a new floor, skirting. This time we got to build a whole, put the trusses on and build the whole thing. And there was another volunteer group there, some adults from Pennsylvania, and they had put on one of the sheets of OSB, Orient Strand Board. That's the sheeting for the roof, a 4x8 foot piece. They had put it on, and it didn't quite match up, so they had to take it off. And to show the inexperience, the woman taking the screws out was sitting on it, and when the last screw came out, she went sliding off the roof, and she hit a sawhorse with her back, landed on a sawhorse with her back, and broke her back. Luckily, one of my chaperones was a medical doctor, and I've had wilderness first responder training, so we were able to backboard her. We made a backboard for her before the ambulance came, because the ambulance is coming from 40 miles away, so it was a while before they got there, and she lived, but they had to take her home right away. The guy in the middle is one of their foremen. He worked with them for about 6 years. He was a great guy, and they don't make a whole lot of money, maybe $7.50 an hour, but because of what he was doing, and housing and food is free. Because of what he was doing, he really loved doing it, and so he stayed for a long, long time. He was just us cooperating, lifting sheets up to the top, except for that kid over there smoking a cigarette. Yeah, I wish I could Photoshop him out, but don't know how. Another kid, here's another example. He had put the sheeting on wrong, and he had to take it out. So he was taking a nail out there. He just crossing on a truss, all part of the same job. In this really, really beautiful valley, the same valley where Wallace Black Elk lived. Black Elk speaks. It's his family that lives in that area. And so we got to meet his granddaughter. She came to visit us one day when we were working. This is at Remember in the backyard. We were cutting up firewood. And the whole team that was working with me had never used a chainsaw, so each person got a chance to use it. Most of them didn't want to do much. One cut, and that's good. I'm good. You take over now. But it was a good experience. I had one bratty kid who got tired of doing sanding bunk beds or sanding outhouses, which is part of the job. You know, sometimes you're just building framing outhouses and building bunk beds. And he didn't like doing it anymore. It's too dusty, and I don't want to do this. Luckily, this wood job came up, and he got to split wood for a whole day, and he loved that. I don't know what was being said, if someone told a dirty joke or what, but we're building a wheelchair ramp to a house. This was one of our volunteers using a skill saw for the first time. This is that girl and I. This was from the previous slide when we were building framing for the skirting. I think that's my van. I think I drove my van that year. It's dead now, though. It's long gone. This is the roofing job. This was a young man, actually from a different high school, and we chartered a bus, and a different high school came with us. And this was I think he was Laotian, but he was a nice kid, and he worked hard. This was my very first job here at Pine Ridge in 2007, and this young lady and I, actually a team of about 40 people were put on this house. Back in those days, they used to take 90 volunteers a week, but it was sometimes overkill, and a lot of people would end up standing around. But this particular job, this whole log cabin, and it was pretty large, had to be scraped clean with wire brushes and then restained. And we were the only two that realized that if you stand on the south side of the house, it's warm. Everyone else is in the shade, and it's March and everyone's freezing. We were in our T-shirt, and we didn't tell anybody so that we could milk this job all day. And this girl went on to become a Peace Corps volunteer and is now married and living in Maryland somewhere. And I still have that T-shirt. Now, this is just the end of the day. Another job where we're putting in a new floor in a kitchen, just new sheeting on flooring. And this just shows some leisure time. You've got leisure time at the end of the evening. After every night, there's a speaker that comes in and gives a cultural presentation, on various topics. And I don't know what night this was, but after that, about 9:30 until 10:30, when lights out, you have an hour to do what you want. They don't allow kids to bring any media, any technology with them. It specifically mentions leave all that stuff home unless you're a crew leader or a chaperone. We have phones here. If you need to call home, we have phones here, and you can call from those phones, so that people will step out of their comfort zone and interact with other volunteers or with Lakota people who they're working with. And I think it's a good idea. And 95% of the kids who have gone out by day 5 had said, "Wow, I haven't been on social media in 5 days, and I'm still breathing. I'm still alive," which is cute because it's a realization that we've lived for generations and generations and generations without this stuff, and I'm the first to recognize how addicting it can be, but I hate it. I just hate it. When I was a teacher, I was kind of notorious for starting every class. I would start by walking around with a box, and everyone had to put their cell phone in that box. And the excuse of, well, what if there's an emergency and my mom needs to reach me? Well, the school has a phone number, and your mom should know what that number is, and they can call that way. This is This is the Sunday, the first day when we go to Wounded Knee. When it's sunny, they take us to a place called the Stronghold. It's in the Badlands, and it's where the people that were chased and killed at Wounded Knee were trying to reach. It's a huge cavern in the Badlands. Anyone ever been to the Badlands? Man, it's like being on the moon. It's a very, very interesting looking place. It's all clay, so it's mountains of clay with erosion marks all over it. And every year, when after any rainy season, there's all kinds of fossils that are starting to emerge as the clay washes away. You can find all kinds of cool stuff. But it's a national park, so you're not supposed to take it. Anyone ever seen Susie at the Field Museum in Chicago? That T-Rex. This is where she was found. She was found in the Badlands. Anyway, when the weather's nice, they take us there and we walk out to the Stronghold, and you don't even know it's there until you get to a certain spot and you look to the left, and there's this little opening in this little canyon. In this canyon, you walk in the canyon, and it opens up to this incredible amphitheater that's maybe 300 or 400 yards across. It's a huge place, and maybe 600 or 800 feet high. And they tell everybody, okay, now we want you all to separate. Find a spot. We're going to meditate for about 30 minutes, or just be in your own thoughts for about 30 minutes and just be quiet. And if somebody is on the top of the hill, 400 yards away, and coughs, you can hear it as far away as you can be. The acoustics in there are absolutely perfect. I've always wanted to bring my violin and play in there, but it never seemed appropriate. This is what the Badlands look like going in. I've always managed to find a cool rock and just kind of put it in my pocket and line the shelves of my bathroom now. This is one of the speakers and his grandson. The boy in the middle is the kid that was using that radial arm saw. His name is Wil Peters, and he's every year I've gone. I've been there 12 times. Every time I've gone, he's one of the speakers on Monday night. He's the Monday night speaker, and he gives a really, really inspiring, he's a teacher himself, so he really knows how to talk to kids. And he gives this incredibly inspiring talk and really fires people up to start to develop that cognitive thing that happens usually in your early 20s, but it can start early if you get the right inspiration to start developing a stronger sense of compassion, and he's really good at firing that up. And then he sings some songs at the end. He's a singer-songwriter. He's won a couple of Native American Music Award for Best Album or Best First Album or something like that. He's a very nice man. I think every single time we've ever gone, my students have said, we've got to raise money to bring him to our school. He needs to come to our school and talk. And we've gone so far as to raise the money, but that year he was going to this Native American Music Award at the same time, and he couldn't come. And so it never happened. Just some friendships get made that last to this day. There's that young woman that I worked with on that log cabin, and she was not a high school student. She was from the University of Maryland that year, and to this day we've kept in touch. So that was nice. And then the man between us, he was an African drummer. He was an African drummer, and I got together with him. He flew out to Chicago, and I met him. And there's a very cool African arts wholesaler in Chicago off of Cicero Avenue. And when you knock on the door, this little window slides open, and he sees who you are, because this is not the safest part of the city to be in. And but he recognizes me now. So we went in, and he bought a bunch of drum shells from Senegal and re-headed them. So he had all these beautiful drums that he took home with him. And this is when the trip is over. It's over on Friday morning. You have your meal, you clean up one last time, and then you leave. And I take the kids west, and we go through Custer State Park and go past Mount Rushmore, and then we end up here at the Crazy Horse Mountain. So you can see in the background the sculpture of Crazy Horse being carved. Like right here, up at the top here, is his face, and this long part is his arm, and the hole underneath is going to be hollowed out to be under his arm. And the horse's head is just starting to take shape. as he's pointing to the Black Hills. And to put this in scope, if you've ever seen Mount Rushmore fits in the armpit of this mountain. The entire mountain is the medium. They're carving the entire mountain. And they've been at it for about 70 years already, and it's going to take another 100 years to finish. But the family that's doing it refuses any federal assistance. They want to do it through private enterprise. And you know, they have some great, there's a film that loops constantly. You can go in and watch, and they show the dynamite blasting away at various stages when they finish the face and things like that. And the dynamite blasts for $1. You can buy one. You can buy a rock from the dynamite blasts as a way to raise funds. And I've got a whole bunch of those in my bathroom too. Let's see. This particular group, as we were leaving Crazy Horse, and now we're heading to Rapid City and then home. You know, it's a 400-mile drive that day that we get to Luverne, Minnesota, which is the western end of Minnesota. We spend the night there. And for anyone who's thinking about maybe organizing a trip to go here, I'll give you the number of. There's a priest named Father Tom at Saint Mary's Catholic Church in Luverne that will let you sleep there for free. They'll just give you a room and you can sleep there on your travel. So you can break it into 2 days. And they've always done that for us, and it's very nice. But on the way from Crazy Horse heading to Luverne, how many of you are familiar with the song Lowrider? Of course, I'm sure most of you know Lowrider. It's like the coolest song that was ever written. Came on the radio, and I slammed on the brakes, and the kids were like, what's going on? And I told everyone, get out of the car. And so both vans stopped, but the other van didn't know what was happening. And we all got out of the car, and I said, we got to dance to this. So we're right on this highway dancing as Lowriders playing, and cars are going by, and the kids are all waving. And the sun goes down, and that's the end of my slide presentation. Click to exit. What am I clicking? Oh, okay, that's good enough. So does anybody have questions? I should have said this in the beginning. If you've got any questions at any time, I'd like you to ask them. Just raise your hand and you can ask, and I'll repeat the question for the sake of the tape. Any questions at all? Yes. So the question is, what do kids on the reservation do for school? Each village has its own high school, or its own school system, and they're all pretty woefully inadequate. Most of them underfunded and it's really hard to keep teachers. You know, most of the teachers are people from Pine Ridge that have gone to school and become teachers and want to somehow give back. One of the places we stop on the tour day is the Ogallala College, which has a teacher education program and as well as a number of good programs. And it's one of the shining stars of Pine Ridge, you know, so they really want to highlight that. It is a good place to visit. Another is the Red Cloud Agency. It's a Catholic school surrounding a big church, and it too is it's because it gets its funding from the church. They have much more services and much more offerings than the village schools, and but the village schools take great pride in defeating them in sports. You know, I'm actually this year when I go out, I'm bringing 20 violins, 3 violas, and a cello to Red Cloud, and they want to start an orchestra, and I have access to a lot of instruments, so I'm going to bring a bunch out there. So that's nice. We have the question is, how expensive is it? I think their fee is about $570. Yeah, that's like I was saying. It's not compared to other mission trips. That's pretty cheap. But if you're going with a group, then you got rental for vans, food for the road, gas for the road, and I've just been so. Yeah, so it's way reasonable, and it's I think it was the Peace Corps. They used to advertise probably before you were born that it's the toughest job you'll ever love, and I think a trip to remember is exactly the same way. A lot of people always bow. I'm coming back. This is. Oh yeah, clothing. You can bring a lot of donation stuff. We once brought a whole trailer full of donations, and unfortunately, when it was being unloaded, they also took our emergency repair kit out of this brand new van that my school had. It's like it was like $180 box filled with stuff, and they thought that was part of the donation, and my class had to foot the bill to pay for that. So what is the government doing to help these people? The truth of the matter is not much. I think the government has a unspoken policy of let's hope these people die off. Eventually they'll, we only give them half of what they need. Eventually they'll go extinct. That's certainly the impression you get. That's not something that you'd ever see on paper, of course, but the action speaks, and they just don't give much. They tried to compensate the Lakota for the taking of the Black Hills. The Treaty of 1868, the Laramie Treaty, promised that the Black Hills would be in perpetuity belong to the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho for as long as the grass shall grow and as long as the sun shall shine, and wording like that. But when Custer snuck in and discovered gold, that was the end of it. And the Black Hills have produced more gold than any other gold mine in the entire world. And so they're not getting it back anytime soon. They're not going to ever get it back. And they tried to buy out the Lakota, and currently there's a bank account with $3 billion in it, $3 billion to compensate for the Black Hills, and they won't take it. They want the land back. It's their spiritual root. It's what they believe they're part of. They came from there, and they are unwilling to trade it. And there's probably some members in there on bad days, wish, man, I couldn't divide it up over 25,000 of us. That would go a long way. But eventually that would get spent, and then it would be gone. So selling things is never a good idea when the motivation is economic, because that money eventually goes away, and then you lose it. Another question? With the Standing Rock? Well, I'm sure that there were many people from Pine Ridge that went down there last winter. I had a friend of mine and I had built a couple of yurts. Do you know what yurts are? It's a Mongolian tent. Built a couple of those to bring to Standing Rock, and we got some wood stoves donated. And we had a whole trailer load of stuff we were going to bring down there. And on my first attempt, my engine on my truck 5 miles away from Madison blew up, failed. And so that trip was out. But I had a buddy that lived in the Dells, and he said, I've got a truck. I'll come down next weekend and we'll drive it out. So on his way down from the Dells, right where you cross the Wisconsin River coming south, he started smelling smoke. And so he decided just a mile beyond that is a rest stop, a brand new rest stop. So we pulled in there. By the time he pulled in, there was now smoke coming out from under the dash. And he never even made it to the parking spaces. He just pulled off on the side of the entrance, and flames were now coming out from under the dash. And he jumped out of the car, and the whole truck burst into flames. His entire truck just burnt right to the ground, down to the rims of his truck. The tires burned away. He tried to go to the back of his truck and pull out things to save, and at that point, the police had arrived, and he got a copy of their camera footage. And so you see this plume of smoke, hundreds of feet in the air, black as night, as he's pulling in, and the cop is saying, "What the F is going on?" And he gets there, and there's this truck on fire. And shortly after that, now at this point, my friend Terry's pulling things out. The thing is still on fire, and the gas tank's right there. A full gas tank is right under him. And he's trying to pull things out of the truck, and the cop grabs him and pulls him out of the way. And he's got smoke inhalation at this point, and he's burned his hands. And then the fire department shows up, and they pull up behind the truck, and they pull out the hoses, and they start spraying just as the gas tank finally melts through, and all that gas hits the ground, ignites, and runs right under the fire truck. And all of the stuff that my friend had pulled out of his truck, he had just thrown it on the side, all burst into flames. A chainsaw and a heater and his clothes and blankets. And when we went to see it, after I got him out of the hospital that late afternoon, we went to where the truck was, and all those things were all melted in the back of the truck. And he thought, why did they do that? Well, all that stuff was good. Why did they do that? So he got a copy of the video, and he saw that the stuff had caught on fire. And that's why he lost it all. So, I never did make it there, so I don't know specifically who from Pine Ridge actually was there, but I'm sure that they were. Question?
If we are
Yes, what I've done, because I've never been able to afford to pay my own way, just the nature of my life, is I started a GoFundMe page for each trip, trying to raise half of, when you take a class of 20 kids, times 500 and whatever, it ends up being a loss. We tried to raise $6,500, about half of what we'd need for the trip, through GoFundMe, and I just kept repeating every day, reposting it on Facebook, and I raised it all, time and time and time again. I have one going right now for the spring trip, but I think we're too far away for people to really see the urgency yet. So there haven't been much donations at this point, but hopefully there will be. So that's a great way. And there's a number of crowdfunding sources, not just GoFundMe, that you could try. The thing with GoFundMe is if you don't make your goal, you still get what you raised. Where with some of the other ones, like Indiegogo, you have to meet your goal to get the money. So I wouldn't recommend using Indiegogo. But that's usually a pretty good way. And just hitting your, if you have Facebook, hitting your friends on Facebook is usually enough. That's why I have like 3,000 friends. Everyone that requests some, they're in because they're potential funding sources for Pine Ridge trips. Yes, one. Well, Remember does. Remember does. If Pine Ridge has one, I don't know of it. I've never had to use it. Remember does. Yeah, you can. Yeah, they're on Facebook, and I think on their website, which is where this booklet came from, not the brochure, but the booklet underneath. That's right directly from their website, and that's everything you need to know if you want to go. Everything you need to know is in there. And that's there too, but the website has a donation link, a window that you can pull down, and various different kinds of donations you can make is explained there. It's a pretty comprehensive website that they put together, and so everything they have, all their vehicles, has all been donated. They get new trucks every few years when people, must be wealthy people, are able to buy them brand new trucks or get used trucks from rental companies and things like that. They're very, very good at PR and at networking with the world. So there is a little bit of time left. Oh, question. Yes, I'm sorry. That's what I was just about to suggest. I'm not sure if we will or not. There may be a picture of people carrying a Sundance tree or something like that, but and I don't know. I don't have a great body of knowledge about the specific spiritual path of the people on Pine Ridge. I know that they're Sundancers. That's a religious movement, and you see Sundance trees all over the reservation, in their way of practicing. At the end of the ceremony, it's a 4-day ceremony. They don't take the tree down. They leave it up, and it's up all year. So they had all these beautiful prayer ties, tobacco ties with long flowing colors all over the top of the tree. You can see them, so that, that's about what I know.